Tonight at 10, it's been a magic Monday for Team GB at the Olympic Games in Japan.
That moment stood behind that rostrum over there and about to be announced as Olympic champions, and then to hear the national anthem play, I was gone. I couldn't even sing.
Among the other winners was Adam Peaty, the first British swimmer to successfully defend an Olympic title. We'll have full details of Team GB's impressive day, and we'll be looking at their prospects for the days ahead, also tonight. Another fall in the daily number of COVID cases in the UK. They've more than halved in the past 9 days. The Afghan army tries to contain the Taliban, but high numbers of civilians have been killed or injured since the start of the year. And Canterbury Cathedral discovers that some of its magnificent stained glass is among the oldest in the world.
And coming up in the sport on the BBC News channel, Tom Pidcock wins Great Britain's third Olympic gold at the Tokyo Games with a dominant performance in the men's mountain bike cross country.
Good evening. It's already been called Magic Monday thanks to the impressive achievements of Britain's Olympians in Japan. 3 gold medals were won in the space of just 5 hours, including one for Tom Daley and his diving partner Matty Lee. It was Daley's 4th Olympic attempt and Lee's very first. The swimmer Adam Peaty and the mountain biker Tom Pidcock also won gold medals. We'll have details of the day's competitions. We'll be looking at Team GB's prospects in the days ahead. But we start with delight for Britain in the diving pool. Our correspondent Natalie Perks reports from Tokyo.
He is the Olympic champion at the 4th time of asking.
I honestly can't believe it, he said, as he wiped away tears of joy. Little wonder this moment has been a long time coming for Tom Daley. So how do you prepare for the biggest final of your life? Knitting, to calm the nerves, of course. Fans at home needn't have worried. He and dive partner Matty Lee had ice in their veins and were second going into the penultimate dive.
And it is! Oh, it's even better than good. That is awesome!
But China are the world champions who'd had a golden grip on this event for 21 years. They were untouchable. Or so we thought.
Now
It's
with
not going to be enough to topple Tom Daley and Matty Lee at the top of the standings.
The 10-metre platform is the height of 2 double-decker buses. Soon the British pair were driving their advantage home.
The world's hardest dive for the
boys.
world's most coveted prize. Oh, yes, it's brilliant!
The commentators were confident, the coaches were confident, and the scores meant the Chinese pair had it all to do.
It's going to have to be incredible, outstanding.
It was exquisite.
Oh my word!
The tension was palpable as the British pair waited for their fate.
Not quite enough for the Chinese, and 4th time is a dream for Tom Daley and Matty Lee.
Daley could be forgiven for telling his partner it's not always as good as this. Finally, he felt the rush he'd always dreamed of.
I think we've just had that unstoppable mentality this year, and that's the first time I've ever been able to even think like that we are the ones to beat and they've got to come and get out. And it's just, I don't know, I still honestly can't believe what's happening.
For Matty Lee, gold on his Olympic debut is quite the story, but for Tom Daley, it's the Hollywood ending to a story we've all been following since Beijing.
I'm going to the Olympic Games.
He calls himself the granddad of the team, but he was once the baby. Along the way, he lost his biggest cheerleader, his father, Robbie, claimed individual bronze in London and another in synchro in Rio. In between those games, he came out and later married the filmmaker Dustin Lance Black. In 2018, their son, Robbie, was born, changing his world. His career is worthy of a movie. His Oscar-winning husband watched it all play out, along with Tom's mum, Debbie.
To have watched Tom dedicate his entire self to this for the 8+ years we've been together, you know, I wanted this for him so badly. And I think Tom's probably cried this many times since I've known him. And last night was the most meaningful.
Tom Daley had heard his fair share of Olympic national anthems. For the boy that grew up on our screens and became a man, this time, finally, the moment was his. Natalie Perks, BBC News, Tokyo.
Well, Team GB's first gold medal of the Tokyo Olympics was won by Adam Peaty, who successfully defended his title in the 100 metres breaststroke. It means that Peaty has not been beaten in that 100 metres breaststroke in major competitions for more than 7 years. This report from our sports editor Dan Rowan does contain some flashing images.
Look at that! No wonder there was a swagger. Such is his domination of this sport, the sense was that all Adam Peaty had to do to defend his title here in Tokyo was turn up. Defeat was unthinkable.
It's so superior, Adam Peaty.
But he still had to deliver when it mattered most.
So he's got to hit the start here, Adam Peaty in the centre in the red hat.
Unbeaten in the 100-metre breaststroke for 7 years, Peaty began as the firmest of favourites. And after a good start, it never really seemed in doubt.
Well, this is very good. This is where he needs to be at the 50. It's a lovely first 50 metres, 1/10 of a second outside his own world record.
By the turn, his lead was established. The only question whether he'd break his own world record. That proved beyond him, but Peaty was in a class of his own.
And Adam Peaty is going to win the second gold medal at consecutive Olympic Games. Look at this, utterly brilliant. Adam Peaty is the double Olympic champion. Fantastic swim.
After so much expectation, a roar of relief.
When he walked out, I could see he wasn't going to get it.
Minutes later, the 26-year-old telling me just how much it meant.
The amount of blood, sweat and tears that have gone into this, the amount of preparation, the investment, time, energy, love. Because we've been through a tough time. COVID or not, vaccine or not, doesn't matter. Everyone's been through a tough time. The world's changed, and hopefully this race and this sport and hopefully the gold medals that are about to follow with Team GB, we can give everyone hope back home.
Adam Peaty is the Olympic champion.
This the first time ever a British swimmer has retained an Olympic title. Victory has rarely felt so inevitable.
So Great Britain's banker at these games delivers again. In truth, it's become hard to imagine Adam Peaty not winning this, Team GB's first gold medal here in Tokyo, and this swimmer's remarkable domination of his event continues.
The man is just a machine, you know, the pressure and the expectation that has been on him by the nation leading up to this Olympics, include COVID, and then include the fact that he becomes the first gold medalist. It's just been extraordinary. You need incredibly broad shoulders to be able to deal with that.
Watching on in the early hours back home in Leicestershire, Peaty's partner and baby son.
I can't even find the words to describe it because I don't think I've felt this kind of pride before. Obviously with George there's a lot of pride, but it's so different, isn't it?
Already swimming's best ever breaststroker, Peaty's status among the greatest of British Olympians now secure. Dan Rowan, BBC News, Tokyo.
Well, 2 months ago, 21-year-old Tom Pidcock from Leeds was recovering after breaking his collarbone. Today, he won gold in the mountain biking race in his first appearance at an Olympic Games. Our sports correspondent Andy Swiss looks at that and some of the other Olympic highlights in Tokyo today. Some flashing images here again.
The journey to Olympic gold has rarely been bumpier. Just 2 months ago, Tom Pidcock broke his collarbone in a training accident. but as he charged to the front in the mountain bike cross-country, you'd hardly have guessed it. The 21-year-old finished so far ahead, he had time to celebrate in style.
Tom Pidcock, the finest young mountain biker around. He takes gold in Tokyo.
Pidcock trained for Tokyo's temperatures in a specially heated tent at his home in Leeds, and how those preparations paid off.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think everyone works so hard for these, for the Olympics, and now, I'm here. Yeah, I'm Olympic. It's unbelievable, really.
Another gold, meanwhile, proved agonisingly out of reach. Lauren Williams took up taekwondo after watching Jade Jones win in 2012. Now Jones was watching her, and with just 10 seconds to go, Williams led the final. But then heartbreak.
Tries the headshot over the shoulder, she gets it.
A late comeback from Croatia's Mateja Jelic, and in a flash, it was all over. So close for Williams, and while silver was still some feat, she was left thinking of the gold that got away.
It's not enough. I know it's not enough. I had her. I'm very happy with how I performed all day. It's just a shame she got in the last 10, but Olympic silver medal's not bad, is it?
There was also British success in the triathlon, albeit after a dramatic start. A boat blocking about half the athletes. They all had to go again. But come the finish, there was delight for Alex Yee, the 23-year-old, taking a superb silver.
A bit bizarre, really, like, that it's me that's doing this. I'm just a normal guy from South East London, so, like, it's just crazy that, like, dreams really do come true, so, like, it's just amazing.
In the skateboarding, meanwhile, teenage flicks are proving hard to beat.
There we go!
Victory for Japan's 13-year-old Momiji Nishia. Indeed, it was the youngest podium in Olympic history. Average age of the medalists, a mere 14 and a half. But the happiest person in Tokyo today wasn't actually an athlete. After Australia's Ariana Titmus won the 400 metres freestyle, her coach Dean Boxall produced an even more remarkable display. If there was a gold medal for celebrating, it would surely be his. Andy Swiss, BBC News.
Yes, it's certainly been a remarkable day, especially for Team GB. Let's talk to our sports editor, Dan Rowan, who joins us now from Tokyo. What are your impressions now, Dan?
Well, Huw, it seems that Monday mornings aren't so bad after all, doesn't it? That was a performance by Team GB that really reminds everyone of how special the Olympics can be, despite all the challenges that the Tokyo Games have faced. Very little in sport can compare when it's like that. And it did evoke memories, didn't it, of that remarkable performance on Super Saturday at London 2012, when 3 of the 6 golds that GB won that day came in a remarkable hour at the Olympic Stadium. Of course, going into these Olympics, there was a sense perhaps that there might be a correction when it came to the number of medals that Britain won. 67, 27 golds in Rio, a remarkable second place finish. But because of a commitment to shift from a win-at-all-costs approach, the conditions here strengthened rivals. There had been an assumption that perhaps Britain would struggle. Well, that performance yesterday, I think, will give them real belief that this can be, once again, a momentous Olympics for them. And I think there were also concerns that because of the time difference, because of the empty seats, people may struggle to really engage with these games. But, you know, it's very difficult to hear the words of Tom Daley after that performance, see the emotion in his face and not be moved by what we saw here. Plenty of GB medal prospects coming up in the coming hours in triathlon, in dressage, taekwondo and in the pool as well. And after one of their greatest days, few would bet against them from adding to that medal haul, up to 5th already in the medal table.
We look forward to it, Dan. Thanks very much once again. Dan Rowan, our sports editor in Tokyo. Let's turn to the day's other main news now. There's been another fall in the daily number of coronavirus cases in the UK. New infections have more than halved since a recent peak 9 days ago. Possible factors are thought to be schools breaking up for the holidays, the end of the Euros football tournament and the warmer weather. What's not yet clear is the impact of lifting England's restrictions last Monday. Our health correspondent Sophie Hutchinson has more details.
Another vaccines push in London's Chinatown today. 88% of adults in the UK have now had at least one shot of the vaccine, and some believe early signs are emerging that the latest wave may be slowing. It was the start of the summer when things began to change. On the 1st of June, you can see there were around 3,000 coronavirus infections reported. They continued to rise sharply until mid-July, when there were almost 55,000 infections a day. But since then, you can see something unexpected has happened, and cases seem to be falling. It's the first time there's been a sustained fall in infections without a national lockdown. It's thought the warm weather may be contributing to cases reducing. The end of the Euros, when football fans gathered to watch the championships, is also thought to have helped. But what's interesting, one leading scientist, is the speed of the drop in cases, which he believes may mean the pandemic has been significantly weakened because of our growing immunity.
We are still likely to see increasing cases come the autumn. But I think what we are seeing is that we are getting on top of this. We are at the point where we can start to look forward to thinking that this epidemic is behind us. But we're not at that point yet, clearly.
But hospitals are still under pressure. Although admissions are nowhere near the levels in the first two waves, the number of patients with COVID-19 is continuing to rise. Here in York, like many hospitals, they're working at full capacity.
It's very good news to hear that community numbers may have started falling, but if you look at the hospital admission numbers, they're still rising exponentially. So we're worried. It's difficult to predict what our peak will be this time. We're thinking around 90 patients at the peak, if the predictions are any good, but yes, we're worried.
Pressure on hospitals is likely to ease if the drop in infections continues. And as the vaccine is rolled out to more people, today's figures show COVID cases have fallen for the 6th day in a row and are now at their lowest level for 3 weeks. Sophie Hutchinson, BBC News.
Let's take a look then at the latest official figures. They show that 24,950 new infections were recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means an average of 36,125 new cases per day in the past week. 14 deaths were recorded in the last 24 hours, meaning on average 64 deaths were recorded every day in the last week. And according to the latest figures, more than 5,200 patients are in hospital with COVID-19. That number is slowly rising. More than 88% of UK adults have now had their first vaccination. More than 70% are now fully vaccinated. Well, during the day, Downing Street has been unable to say how many of its new COVID testing sites in England are now operational. Sites are intended to ease the problem of workers in some key sectors, such as food distribution, having to self-isolate. The government says that 500 sites will be set up this week, with 2,000 sites planned in total. Let's talk to our correspondent Caroline Davis, who's with me. Do we actually know what the state of these sites is right now, Caroline?
Huw, that is the big question, because of course the sooner that these sites are set up, the easier it is for industries to start to reduce the impact of the number of pings that they have had with their staff. Now, the government have also just announced 13 more industries that are going to be getting these testing sites. So that includes prisons, defence, waste collection, energy, water. That's just to name a few. And as you say, taking it up to 2,000 test sites. We haven't had any confirmation from the government about exactly how many of these are currently up and running, but expecting about 500 by the end of the week. Now, this is a big rise in numbers. Industry have been bashing down the door saying we are exempt too, we should be exempt, we should be part of these essential services. The real balance for the government has been the fact that they need to keep the country going, but at the same time, they don't want to give so many exemptions that it means that the policy ends up being relatively pointless. Really interestingly, this evening, in the announcement adding on additional industries, the government cited a study saying that the daily contact testing is just as effective as controlling transmission through isolating for 10 days. This could well be a sign of the government starting to make the argument for moving from mass isolation potentially towards mass testing as a way of putting a brake on the virus.
OK, Caroline, once again, thanks very much. Caroline Davis, our correspondent there with the latest. Now, 2 14-year-old boys have been found guilty of the murder of 13-year-old Ollie Stevens, who was stabbed in a park in Reading in January. He He'd been persuaded to go to the park by a 14-year-old girl who's admitted manslaughter, and he was then attacked by two boys carrying knives. None of the guilty can be identified for legal reasons, as our correspondent Andrew Plant reports.
Ollie Stevens seen on a neighbour's camera. The 13-year-old schoolboy had no idea he was walking into a trap. Ollie's phone messages showed he'd arranged to meet a girl at a nearby park that January afternoon, this beauty spot just a few hundred yards from his own front door. But Ollie walked into an ambush, two boys aged 13 and 14 who he'd fallen out with on social media. In the attack, Ollie was stabbed once in the chest and once in the back. The two boys and the girl then ran away from the park, throwing away the knife as they fled. Today, the Crown Prosecution Service said they'd also deleted shared videos and messages to try to cover up the crime, but they said it was their digital footprint that had proved to be their undoing. Passers-by called an ambulance and alerted Ollie's parents. They arrived just before Ollie died from his injuries in the back of an ambulance. The court was shown this phone footage of one of the boys playing with a knife in his bedroom. The other also had pictures of knives. At the scene of the attack now, tributes to Ollie, where neighbours have been laying flowers and hanging messages.
And I feel sorry for the parents that lost their son at an early age like this. He didn't even enjoy his youthful life and he's gone now. So it's really sad. Every time I come here, just taking my walk, I come and pay my respects to Ollie.
Ollie's family said the callous and cold-hearted killing had devastated their family. Their son, they said, was a precious gift. His death, the stuff of nightmares. The two boys, now both 14, today found guilty of murder. The girl had previously admitted Ollie's manslaughter. They will all be sentenced in September. Andrew Plant, BBC News.
The representatives of 51 nations met in London today for what the UK government is calling critical discussions ahead of the Global Climate Conference in Glasgow in November. The minister in charge of the talks believes that richer countries need to deliver on their promises to provide funding to help poorer nations deal with climate change.
Back in 2009, the developed nations, the donor nations, said that by the year 2020, they would be putting forward $100 billion a year. I can't tell you how much of a totemic figure it is. It is absolutely a matter of trust. We must deliver on the $100 billion a year now.
Alok Sharma, the minister there, speaking earlier today. Now, in Afghanistan, high numbers of civilians, many of them children, have been killed or injured in the first half of this year, according to the United Nations. As violence escalates, more than 1,600 civilian deaths have been recorded, a rise of nearly 50% compared with this time last year. And government forces have been fighting Taliban insurgents who now control vast areas of rural territory following the withdrawal of most international troops. Our correspondent Secunda Kamani has sent this report.
Fighting has been flaring across Afghanistan. As international troops pull out, Afghan forces have been trying to hold back an intensifying Taliban advance. Brothers Ishaq and Ramzan lived in Ghazni province. When fighting erupted close to their home, their family tried to flee. The Taliban stopped us. Their father, Nadir Shah, told me. They accused my sons of being soldiers. I went to get their ID cards to prove they weren't. But by the time I got back, they had already been shot. This year has seen record high numbers of child casualties. This horrendous attack left more than 80 dead, mostly schoolgirls. The UN is warning violence could get even worse.
Unless there is a de-escalation in the conflict, we're very concerned that based on what we've seen in the past 6 months, we'll see high levels and perhaps potentially the highest on record number of civilian casualties.
So far, most of the Taliban's advance has been in more rural areas, but their focus is increasingly switching to the more densely populated cities. With peace talks largely stalled, that means even more innocent lives are likely to be lost. Secunda Kamani, BBC News, Kabul.
Canterbury Cathedral, a place of Christian worship for over 1,000 years, is now believed to be the home of some of the oldest examples of stained glass anywhere in the world. Some panels have now been redated using a new technique, and experts say they were crafted in the middle of the 12th century. The cathedral authorities say it's a hugely significant find, as very little was thought to have survived from the fabric of the early cathedral, as our science correspondent Palab Ghosh reports.
Canterbury Cathedral is among the oldest churches in England. Inside, its stunning windows depict symbolic religious scenes. This series was thought to have been made in the 13th century, but some of the panels, including this one of the Prophet Nathan, have now been redated. For decades, historians have thought that some of these panels were made earlier than the others because they're different in style. Now, using a new technique, scientists have confirmed that not only are they much older, but they may well be among the oldest in the world. It's only come to light now because of this device called a windowlizer. It may not look like much, but it was developed by scientists to be used on location without damaging the glass. It shines a beam onto the surface, which causes the material inside to radiate. This radiation contains a chemical fingerprint from which the researchers worked out its age.
We've been working on this detective story for some time, putting all the pieces in place, and then we finally get an answer, something new, that brings together science and art into one story. It's fantastic.
These are all stories that were recorded at the time they happened here.
The discovery has astonished Leonie Seliger, who looks after the stained glass windows here. She believes that the redated panels could go back to the mid-1100s and were in place during great historical events at the cathedral, including the assassination of the then Archbishop Thomas Becket, who features in many of these windows.
They would have witnessed the murder of Thomas Becket. They would have witnessed Henry II come on his knees begging for forgiveness. They would have witnessed the conflagration of the fire that devoured the cathedral in 1174. And then they would have witnessed all of British history.
The cathedral contains the story of England's history, its artistry and its religious thinking. Now, a new scientific discovery has given us a fresh perspective on the nation's past. Palab Ghosh, BBC News, Canterbury Cathedral.
That's it. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a good night.